I thought losing my wealth was the worst thing that could happen to me. I was wrong. Because once you're on the streets, the real suffering begins. Hunger becomes a living thing inside you, gnawing at your ribs, turning your body weak, your thoughts sluggish. It isn't just a passing discomfort, it's a slow, merciless predator, stalking you every hour of the day. At first, you tell yourself you can endure it. But by the third, fourth, fifth day of scraps and nothingness, you understand hunger is stronger than pride. Then there's the cold. Not just the kind that seeps into your skin, but the kind that settles into your bones, into your soul. You try to bundle up, huddle in corners, seek warmth in the little places the city forgets. But the nights are long, and the wind doesn't care if you once lived in a penthouse. Cold doesn't respect a man's past. It only knows the present. And then there's fear. The kind that never truly leaves you. Fear of not knowing where your next meal will come from. Fear of sleeping in the wrong alley and waking up with a knife at your throat. Fear of closing your eyes and never waking up again. But worse than hunger, worse than cold, worse than fear, the way people look through you. You become invisible. They walk past as if you're nothing, like you're just part of the sidewalk, part of the dirt, part of the city's shame. Their eyes don't meet yours. They pretend you don't exist, because acknowledging you means accepting that you could be them. And worst of all, the ones who take advantage of people like me, the ones who see desperation and smell opportunity, the scammers, the dealers, the predators who don't steal wallets, they steal dignity. They promise jobs that don't exist, food that comes with a price, protection that costs more than money. You learn quick retrust can kill you. I thought losing my wealth was the worst thing that could happen to me. But losing my place in the world, that was worse. Hunger is different when you can't fix it. It starts as an ache, something dull and manageable. But as the hours pass, that ache sharpens, twisting deep in your stomach until it feels like it's eating you from the inside out. Your body grows sluggish, your limbs heavy, your thoughts slow, clouded by the one thing your mind can't stop screaming: food. I spent the first few days wandering, my pride still intact, telling myself I would find a way before it got worse. That maybe I'd stumble upon an opportunity, a bit of luck, a place willing to hand out a meal. But luck isn't something the streets give freely. By the third day, my pride wasn't just crumbling, it was starving too. I started watching the way others survived. The way some lined up outside churches for a bowl of soup, the way others held out their hands on busy sidewalks, eyes hopeful, voices soft with practiced desperation. And then there were the ones like me, too ashamed to beg, too desperate to refuse what the world threw away. That was how I found myself in a park, my body weak, my stomach a hollow pit, watching a man eat a sandwich on a bench. He took his time, scrolling through his phone between bites, not even noticing me, not noticing how my gaze was locked on his hands, on the movement of the bread, on the way each bite disappeared. And then, just like that, he was full. He crumpled up the wrapper, still half a sandwich left inside, and tossed it into the garbage without a second thought. I stared at the can. I told myself to walk away, to wait for something better, to not sink that low. But hunger doesn't care about dignity. Hunger strips you bare, makes you do things you never imagined. And for the first time in my life, I reached into a garbage can. My fingers trembled as they closed around the sandwich, my heart pounding not from shame, but from the primal need to eat, to survive. I didn't think. I didn't hesitate. I just ate. And in that moment, I understood hunger is the great equalizer. It doesn't care about who you used to be. It only knows what you are now. Weak, desperate, hollow. My clothes, once tailored to perfection, now hung off my body like old rags. My hands, once used to signing deals, now trembled from exhaustion. My pride, once unshakable, was already in pieces. I hadn't even realized how empty my expression must have been, until a voice cut through the noise of the street. Eat! I looked up. An older man stood in front of me, his face weathered by time, by hardship, by survival. His clothes were worn, his hands rough with the calluses of a life spent scraping by. Yet in those tired eyes, There was no judgment, only understanding. He held out a piece of bread. I hesitated. Why? He smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. It was the kind that carried memories, that had seen too much. Because I know what it's like. He didn't wait for me to take it. He simply placed it in my hands and walked away, disappearing into the crowd like a ghost. For a moment, I just sat there, staring at the small, crumbling piece of bread in my palm. This wasn't charity. It wasn't pity. It was recognition. It was one person who had nothing, offering what little they could to someone who had even less. And as I took a bite, something unfamiliar burned in my chest, something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not gratitude, not hope, humanity. Because for the first time since I had fallen, someone saw Menno as a failure, not as a disgrace, but as a person worth saving. There are unspoken rules out here, rules that aren't written down, rules no one tells you outright, but if you don't learn them fast, you don't survive. Rule number 1, stay out of certain spots. Some alleys, some corners, some stretches of sidewalk, they belong to others. You don't ask why, you don't test your luck, you just know. I learned this my first week. I picked the wrong alley to sleep in, tucked myself into a dark corner, thinking I had finally found a quiet place for the night. I woke up to a boot pressing against my ribs. Move, a voice growled. A man twice my size, eyes cold, hands scarred. I didn't argue. I didn't ask questions. I ran, because out here, you don't fight for territory. You either have it, or you learn to keep walking. Rule number 2, never take more than what you need. Greed gets you noticed, and getting noticed, that gets you hurt. I once saw a new guy fresh to the streets, still clinging to the idea that fairness existed, pick up a whole bag of leftover food outside a restaurant. He thought he had gotten lucky, thought he could stash it away, save it for later. By morning, he was gone. People whispered he got jumped in the night, that someone saw what he had, followed him, took everything. I never saw him again. I didn't need to ask what happened. You take only what you can eat, only what you can carry. Anything more makes you a target. Rule number 3, don't trust too easily. The worst mistake you can make? Thinking kindness is free. Not everyone who offers a helping hand does it out of goodness. Some people see desperation and smell opportunity. There are those who will promise you shelter, only to take everything you have. Those who will offer food, only to expect something in return. And the worst kind? The ones who pretend to be your friend until the moment they need a sacrifice. I met a man once. Name was Rico. Smooth talker. Always had a deal. Stick with me, he said. I'll teach you how to make real money out here. A week later, he set someone up, pinned a stolen wallet on the guy, just to save himself. That was the last time I trusted a stranger's smile. The final rule, learn fast or don't last. There's no manual for this life. No guidebook. You listen, you watch, you keep your head down. Because the streets don't forgive mistakes. And if you break the wrong rule, you might not get a second chance. One night, I made a mistake. I was exhausted. My body ached from days of hunger, from walking too far with nowhere to go. The cold had settled deep into my bones, and I just needed somewhere where to rest. That's when I found the alley. It was narrow, tucked between 2 crumbling buildings, half hidden from the main street. A single dumpster sat against the wall, the ground littered with scraps. Quiet, secluded, seemed safe enough. I curled up in the shadows, pulling my coat tighter around me, trying to disappear. And for a few hours, I did, until the footsteps came, heavy, purposeful, not alone. I barely had time to react before I felt a fist slamming into my ribs. I gasped, curling in on myself. But another hit came, then another. My head spun. A voice growled above me, deep, rough, and full of fury. "You're in my alley." I coughed, blinking through the pain, and finally saw him, Big Joe. I'd heard the name before, whispered among the others on the streets. A man you don't cross, a man who owns his space. And I had just walked right into it. He didn't ask questions. He didn't care who I was. I was trespassing. That was enough. I fought back, instinct kicking in. Threw a punch, trying to push him off, but I was weak. Hunger makes you slow. Pain makes you desperate. He barely felt my hit before driving his knee into my stomach, knocking the breath from my lungs. I collapsed to the ground, gasping, too weak to fight, too broken to run. For a moment, I thought he'd finish it, that this would be the night I disappeared like so many others who had picked the wrong place, the wrong fight. But instead, he stepped back. "Get up," he muttered. I forced myself to my knees, my ribs aching with every breath. He crouched down, leveling his gaze with mine. His eyes were dark, unreadable, dangerous. "You take what's mine again," he said, his voice like gravel. "I'll leave you for dead." Then he was gone, just like that. I sat there for a long time, blood in my mouth, bruises forming, the cold creeping back in. Lesson learned. The streets don't care who you were. They only care if you survive. I never thought I'd do it. I never thought I'd stand on a street corner. My pride shattered, my hands stretched out to strangers, waiting, hoping for someone to drop a few coins into it. But hunger doesn't care about pride. Hunger doesn't care about the past. So there I was, standing on a busy sidewalk, my back against a cold brick wall, my palm open, empty, waiting. At first, no one even looked at me. They walked by, their faces set, their eyes fixed on something that wasn't me. They adjusted their coats, tapped at their phones, quickened their steps like I was a stain on the concrete. I wasn't a person to them. I was a problem, an inconvenience, a part of the city they wished wasn't there. The rejection stung, more than I expected. I wanted to disappear, to curl into myself, to pretend I wasn't here, to run. But then I saw him, a man across the street, older, experienced, a real beggar. And I watched him work. He didn't just hold out his hand, he made them see him. He looked people in the eye, smiled at them, nodded in acknowledgement, not as a beggar, but as a person. I swallowed, exhaled, and tried it myself. The next passerby, I lifted my chin, met their gaze, a woman in a red coat, hesitant, shifting her purse. I didn't look away. For a second, she just stared. Maybe she saw something in my face. Maybe she just felt guilty. But then, she reached into her pocket, and she dropped $1 into my palm. It wasn't much, but it was something. And when you have nothing, something is everything. Money was slow. Food was slower. The few coins I managed to collect in a day weren't enough to buy a full meal. A stale piece of bread here, a cheap snack there, but never enough to kill the hunger completely. I learned quickly if I wanted to eat, I had to scavenge. At first, the thought disgusted me. Digging through trash, picking through scraps. I used to sit in 5-star restaurants, complain about the wine being too warm, send back plates that weren't plated to perfection. Now I was looking for food in the places I once ignored. I started where others like me did, grocery store dumpsters. The trick was knowing when they threw things out. Some stores locked their bins, some poured bleach over everything, ensuring no one could take what they had deemed unfit to sell. But others? They left perfectly good food sitting there, day-old bread, bruised fruit, cans with a dent too small to matter. Behind restaurants was another spot. You had to be fast. The best time was right after closing, before the trash trucks came. If you were lucky, you found leftovers that hadn't been mixed with the waste. A half-eaten sandwich, a takeout box with a few bites untouched. Food people tossed without a second thought. Cafes were different, easier but riskier. I learned to sit near the outdoor tables, waiting, not asking, just watching. Some people left food behind, barely touched. A forgotten croissant, a muffin missing just one bite. The first time I took one, my hands shook. Not from fear, from shame. The hardest part wasn't the hunger. It wasn't the cold, the waiting, the sorting through trash. It was swallowing my pride every single time I reached for something that wasn't mine. Because no matter how many times I told myself, this is survival, there was always a voice in my head whispering, look at what you've become. One night, I met Rico, a street hustler who ran scams. He wasn't like the others, the ones barely scraping by, the ones holding out their hands and hoping for mercy. Rico didn't beg. He took. I watched him work for a few days, how he moved through the streets like a shadow, always one step ahead, one lie away from his next meal. He had a system, Sometimes it was as simple as slipping into a cafe, sitting at an empty table, and pretending the untouched plate of food was his. Other times, he staged accidenza fake limp, a fabricated sob story, a well-rehearsed tale of bad luck that made people reach for their wallets before they even realized what they were doing. And it worked. One night, as I sat hunched in an alley, stomach tight with hunger, he found me. He crouched beside me, tossing me an apple, like we were old friends. "Why beg when you can take?" he asked, smirking. "I can teach you." I stared at the apple in my hand, my fingers gripping it like it might disappear. I was desperate, hungry, and for a moment, I considered it. I considered what it would be like to stop feeling powerless, to stop waiting for scraps. But then something inside me hesitated. How far was I willing to fall? I had already lost my name, my dignity, my place in the world. Would I lose my soul too? Rico must have seen the doubt on my face because he scoffed, shaking his head. "You'll learn," he said, standing up. "When you get hungry enough, you'll learn." Then he disappeared into the night, slipping through the crowd with ease, already looking for his next mark. I sat there, staring at the apple, and I knew he was wrong. Because if I ever reached the point where I was willing to steal, to lie, to scam my way through life then, I would have lost the last thing I had left. Myself. I saw what happened to the ones who followed Rico. At first, they thought they were smart slick, untouchable, just like him. He taught them how to spin stories, how to read a mark, how to take, without ever getting their hands dirty. For a while, it worked. But the thing about playing the game the way Rico did, sooner or later, you lose. I saw one of his guys get caught, dragged into an alley by a man twice his size after trying to pickpocket the wrong person. The next day, he was gone. No one saw him again. Another one-a kid barely out of his teens got sloppy. A shopkeeper caught him stuffing food into his jacket. The cops came. He didn't just lose the stolen food, he lost his freedom. And then, there were the ones who got in too deep, tangled up in jobs that didn't end with just a few quick bucks. They owed people, and when you owe people in the streets, you either pay or you disappear. So, when Rico came to find me again, flashing his easy grin, his hands in his pockets like he already knew my answer, I was ready. "You thought about it, huh?" he said, tossing me a piece of bread. "You ready to stop starving?" I caught the bread, but I didn't eat it. I met his eyes, steady. "I'm not a thief." His smile faded, just for a second. Then he laughed, shaking his head. "Then you're a fool." Maybe I was. Maybe I'd keep going hungry. Maybe I'd keep struggling, waiting for scraps, trying to survive the hard way when there were shortcuts right in front of me. But I still had some lines I wouldn't cross. Because once you start stealing, once you start justifying the things that chip away at who you are, you don't come back from that. And I had already lost everything. I wouldn't lose myself too. Weeks passed. At first, I counted the days, clinging to the idea that this was temporary, that somehow, some way, I would find a way back. Back to stability, back to dignity, back to the life I had lost. But hope fades fast when every day is a battle just to stay warm, just to stay fed, just to keep moving. I stopped looking for a way back, stopped scanning newspapers for opportunities, stopped watching people in suits walk by, imagining myself among them, stopped believing that this was just a phase, a bad dream I could wake up from. I stopped believing I could leave. Because the longer you live like this, the more it seeps into you the way the cold does when you have no shelter. The way hunger becomes something you just endure instead of something you fight. It became routine. The streets, the hunger, the struggle. Wake up stiff and sore, shake off the dirt, find something to eat or at least find something to trick your stomach into believing was food. Find a spot where people might drop change, but not one so crowded that someone stronger might take it from you. Walk with purpose, even if you had nowhere to go because looking lost made you a target. And at night, find a place to sleep where no one would bother you. Hope it wouldn't rain. Hope you'd wake up at all. This was my life now. And the worst part? I was starting to accept it. The idea of fighting my way back no longer felt like a goal. It felt like a fantasy. The life I once had, the man I used to be, felt like someone else entirely. I told myself I would try again. Someday. But not today. Not tomorrow. Because surviving was hard enough.